Ahoy! New World is going to get its biggest update since Brimstone Sands that will be completely free. I was going to make a video called I'm not coping for New World, but until recently, with this I am officially coping for New World because this is absolutely crazy in terms of free content, in terms of what it delivers for a single season, for returning players and everything. So let's just talk about what's in there. It's a lot of different things. A lot of different players will be very happy with this, I think. And everything in here is worth talking about. They're mentioning a new zone, evolving endgame systems, and a 10-player raid. And that's not even summarizing everything that's in there. It'll release on Monday the 13th of October, so it is pretty much in line with the Season Pass. And it will be free for all New World Aeternum owners. New World Aeternum for PC players typically means New World and New World Rise of the Angry Earth, so I'm not sure how that will be handled. I'm sure they will tell us more about that later. I'm guessing you will have to have Rise of the Angry Earth and you want that anyways for mounts, but I don't know what the specifics of that will be. There's going to be an entirely new zone called Nighthaven. This zone is, from what we've seen from data mining, pretty massive, and it continues the storyline as well conceptually, where we left off the announcement that there's going to be like vampires and werewolves. We can see just from this picture here that the overall theme is going to be very much gloomy forest with all kinds of creatures inside of it. The main story will continue here as well with the tier of Gaia revolving around recovering said tier. Also on the PvE side, there is a new game mode called Catacombs, and I'm gonna read this one out because it's pretty interesting. Catacombs is a new game mode in which up to 3 players explore the depth of a procedurally generated dungeon, battling a variety of enemies and bosses, gaining unique mode-specific power-ups, collecting cursed resources and currency, and racing to successfully exit and cleanse their treasures before time runs out. While the difficulty of Catacombs is moderate at the start of a session, the challenge and reward is increased significantly each time a boss is defeated. To counter this, players are able to acquire in-mode power-ups that enhance their stats and abilities, so basically a roguelike at that point. With each boss defeated, players must decide between pushing further into the Catacombs for even greater rewards, or safely making the exit before time runs out. Failure to make a safe exit results in a loss of the vast majority of the treasures collected, but only one player needs to safely exit to avoid this. So really interesting concept. I think this could be very interesting. Take something that I saw announced in another MMO recently. I actually forgot which one it was, an upcoming MMO that is also kind of doing this procedurally generated stuff with a roguelike element to it. And I'm very curious about the 3-player setup as well, because obviously the first expectation here would be you're doing either 3 ranged guiding players, or you're doing a tank, a healer, and a single DPS. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe there will be different ways to solve this. It's a very interesting setup, and so far that obviously I think most players would have expected a 5-player setup, a normal expedition setup, me included. But I do think there is an appeal in the 3-player format because it just makes it a bit quicker. You can do it with a smaller group of friends. And it's kind of similar in that way to 3v3 arenas, I guess. And with that time limit, you also know exactly how much time you'll be spending in these catacombs, which I think is very nice for more casual players. So you can plan ahead basically and be like, okay, I have got half an hour and I can do 1 run or 2 runs or whatever. And that's it. What I don't know also is how it's going to work in terms of gearing, because obviously if you have randomized mobs, you might have randomized bosses, for example. I don't know if it's just the areas or whatever that are procedure generated, and then you'd have to switch gear a lot. So not sure how that's going to play into that, but either way, very interesting, and I think this will have a lot of longevity as long as the rewards are matching it. But I expect that this will be probably one of the places where you can get Umbral Shards, and that alone would make it relevant. We'll get to the Umbral Shards a little bit later. There's also a new raid, which is very much in line with Hive of the Gorgons. I think they may have actually been working on this around the same time already, because there was some very old data mining about things related to a boss with spiders, and then we thought that would be in the Hive of the Gorgons, and we had spiders there, but we didn't actually have the spider boss thing. So maybe this was what they were working on then. Isle of the Night is a 10-player raid, and they say that, you know, you will have 3 bosses, similar puzzles, challenges, new enemy types, all that stuff. And it'll be some of the hardest content in the Season 10, demanding players gear up and coordinate to succeed. I would expect that we'll see a similar difficulty level to Eye of the Gongs as well, which was cleared relatively quickly by coordinated groups. It didn't really take long, it was easier than Sandworm, but in comparison then for Pugs, it took quite a while longer to get to that point consistently, and I'm thinking that's probably the level of difficulty they'll stick with until they have a system for multiple scaling difficulty levels, which it doesn't seem like is coming this season, though I know they're working on something in that regard. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see more updates for Season 10, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. If you're going to get early trading tips for the season, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Endgame progression is getting a major overhaul in multiple ways. So the first thing that we're getting is the level cap increase to 70 with a gear score maximum of up to 800. This was already leaked. If you heard one of the devs say that at some point, he was saying 800 gear score, and then the level 70 was from one of the other leaks. So that was already known, but what wasn't known here is that PvP modes will scale you up to 775. So even if straight after the expansion you jump into PvP modes right away, it should be relatively even ground between whoever doesn't go for the PvE grind first, or who just goes for the quests and tries to unlock 800 gear score stuff. Should be close enough. I think there will be other systems here though that are more relevant. The first one of those is the new gear modding system, Perk charms. So instead of one customizable gem socket, gear can now have up to 4 empty sockets in which players can install new perk modifiers called charms. Charm sockets and charms themselves have 3 types: defensive, offensive, and skill. The charms can be picked up fully refined, but more commonly will need to be crafted with rare materials which drop from endgame content. First thing that's interesting in that regard is that we'll have these 3 different types. So question is going to be if there are any limitations, if you have to have one defensive, one offensive, one skill perk, or if you can freely choose, because obviously at the moment there are limitations to that to some degree, but also not everything, right? You can have multiple different types of defensive perks right now. You could have Enchanted Ward and Slash Conditioning or whatever, whereas this might actually make it a little bit more limited if you're forced to take a skill slot on every piece of gear. So maybe that won't be the case. And also it does mention that there are up to 4 sockets, not 3. So that might indicate that that's the 800 gear score thing, that you get an extra socket. So a lot of things that we don't really know from this. I'm sure we get more details, but very interesting potential in that. We can min-max a lot more theory crafting that is allowed through that. Gonna be interesting how that is for like set in stone gear, like artifacts as well, how many perks you can change on those. And it's also going to be interesting how rare these materials will be, how expensive it'll be to do any of this, because obviously if this is some very rare, difficult to get stuff, it also kind of locks you into like one build very, very hard, which you will normally stay away from. But then again, there's also the question if these perks or these perk charms are going to be super necessary on every piece. If there's a downside to having them on every piece, think for example like Magnify, maybe something like that, where sometimes you don't want to have them specifically for whatever reason. There might be perks that you can't get from them. Who knows how exactly that'll all work, but it is going to be very interesting. It's going to be a big question how much of the current gear will stay relevant because of that or won't. And there's something else that may require you to replace your gear sooner or later, which is set bonuses. So they call these ultra rare sets of gear that you can only get from endgame content. So the Isle of Night raid, Catacombs, again, probably a reason to play Catacombs there, and the PvP track. And it doesn't even seem like this is going to be Gorgons or Sandworm either, based on how they're putting this. And they say they want to encourage players to mix and match these sets to achieve their desired build type. So this is going to be interesting. There's going to be 2 types of set bonus perks. One of them, or one possibility here, is ones that activate at 2 equipped pieces and then get better at 4 equipped pieces. But with other sets, it is only active at 3 equipped pieces or gets better at 5 equipped pieces. And because of that, there are 7 different possible combinations. You can see them all here. that provide you with different bonuses, and you have to kind of choose if you want to have more lower tier bonuses, more higher tier bonuses, more 5 tier bonuses. And I also don't know how exactly that's going to work, because it would force you into very specific gear, where maybe you can change all the perks on that. Maybe they all have sockets everywhere, but it is going to be complicated to fully figure out what the best setup in that regard will be, I'm sure. And they say it's up to you to decide the best combination of effects that best suits your unique playstyle. Also, in that context of the sets and sockets and bonuses and everything, it is going to be interesting with the new perk sockets, if you can unsocket something once you have it, or if it breaks like the gems currently do, because that would otherwise allow for a lot more flexibility, and then maybe these set bonuses here would be more relevant instead, where like, okay, I can switch my perks as I want, but I cannot use the same bonuses effectively for different loadouts, like a ranged loadout would not have the same perk bonuses as a light loadout. So a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of combination stuff that you need to figure out, and also no information yet on how artifacts play into that, because they do mention that you can have sets with this many perks, but then if you're putting artifacts into the mix, will they have those set bonuses too? Because if not, then using an artifact means sacrificing a set bonus, which might be worse depending. So very, very interesting in many ways what they will have in terms of impact on the game as a whole. And then of course I already mentioned Umbral Shards, and they are coming back as well, and there's going to be some interesting outcomes for this, I think. So they say this means that all gear in the new paradigm stays viable and upgradable with Umbrals rather than the clunky system at the Gypsum Kiln. Any gear with gear score of at least 700 can be upgraded with Umbrals. So every named item that you can currently farm and that you can upgrade to 700 will be upgradable. Question is, do you have to upgrade it before the update? Because maybe the old systems no longer exist based on them saying that the Gypsum Kiln system is clunky. Unsure about that, but definitely something worth keeping in mind, something that I think is interesting. Either way, they say that the system will also work slightly differently than Umbrals in the past, as it now has a currency, or is a currency with a wallet cap of 1,000 and a weekly rate limit. So that's going to make things a lot more difficult to navigate when it comes to just trying to hoard Umbrals like you used to. That's not going to be possible. And they say this is to keep the Umbral's value from deteriorating over time. So I can absolutely see the weekly limit. That makes perfect sense. I'm not so sure if I like the cap. I feel like if you found them weekly and you decide to not invest them right away, that should be your choice. You should be able to just say, hey, I'm gonna let these stack up forever and then upgrade 10 pieces at once because I haven't decided yet, but I still want to farm them until I do. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the cap, but I'm fine with the weekly rate limit because I understand the problems that otherwise come from the extreme gap between someone who like massively grinds expeditions all day versus someone who just casually plays. There's also so-called infix perks where we're not really getting too much information yet. They say there will be unique gear pieces with powerful and rare perks called infixes. These will function similar to how unique perks on artifacts work, but beyond that we don't really know where they come from. If this is like similar to like artifacts of strength, probably not, but then why would you use them over the sets and the artifacts, or will they be part of the sets? I don't know. They will exist as well. We need more information on those. The next change has a bit confusing wording. So they say that there will no longer be any perks which increase attributes. They say they felt these perks didn't really result in a meaningful choice between two good alternatives, so they decided to reclaim that slot for more interesting perks. The way I understand this is they're not talking about the perks for attributes that are on like specific gear, like attuned pants or something, but rather the actual attributes that come with gear, because at the moment that is classified as a perk technically. I think that is what they're saying. I think they're saying there's no longer attributes on gear, but rather just the perk effects, which is going to make them usable for more builds as well, which is nice. Instead, all of the attribute perks or attribute points that used to come from these perks have been added into the native attribute point pool granted by normal leveling. So you'll have a lot more attributes from that, which then begs the question, how is that going to work between 700, 800 gear score gear? But I'm assuming that's where the extra perk slot will likely come in. And maybe the armor value and damage values and everything. So there's still going to be enough reasons to get the higher gear score, as far as I can tell. And to make this easier to manage, which could really be a separate point here, they have made gear set storage loadouts now also save your current attribute loadout. So you can have, I think you can have maximum 9 gear set storages, so 9 different loadouts. That should be plenty. The attribute perks on existing gear have been replaced with other perks of relatively low power, since players will keep the power the attribute perks used to yield. Not sure how exactly that will play out. Sometimes these old perks lead to some funky things, but we'll have to see about that. Maybe the really old items that have had like 2 attribute perk combos for some reason will suddenly have like 5 perks. Who knows? They're also doing what they usually do, which is perk design changes. They've done a complete sweep through their collection of perks and made some structural changes. The goal is to make perk selection conditional and thoughtful, and to eliminate must-have perks that simply raise the critical combat numbers like damage, stamina, and cooldown reduction without some sort of meaningful drawback. They try this every time, and every time there is must-have perks again anyways, because that's just how games develop. There's always gotta be min-maxing. People will try and find the best thing, but they have done a very good job, I will say, with defensive perks overall. Enchanted Ward obviously stands out, but there are a lot of defensive perks that are viable at the moment, that are comparable, and that are in direct competition, and also some perks that are, I think, sometimes underrated, that people just don't value as much anymore, that are still very viable in many situations. One that I think is very interesting that stands out here is stamina being mentioned specifically, which makes me think, especially with bare bones OPR and everything, that they may be removing Hearty potentially from rings, because that is such a must-have perk for almost every build that I could imagine them giving that a drawback at least, which would be very interesting, because that would ruin a lot of people's playstyle, and I would be completely fine with that because I love bare bones and how combat feels there. There's also going to be a new OPR map called the Tower. Still has the same base functionalities. You'll still have some resources that you need to gather and all that stuff, aside of the 3 capture points. But what's very different about this is that it's 3 vertical layers. So the capture points are basically on top of each other instead. There's going to be a lot of underground passages, a lot of tunnels and all that stuff, which I think makes for a really cool atmosphere, really cool layout. Seeing a little bit of data mining of this, and it's looking really good. This will also be the first OPR map to feature jump pads as well, so they're taking one out of the book from Capture the Flag here. And this new map you will be able to test from September 23rd to September 30th, so very, very soon, which also goes in line with the rumors of some announcements coming out on September 22nd. I think that would be where they make a big reveal of all of this, and then we'll be able to test run things a little bit. And they also say that there will be a developer video going in depth on Season 10 coming early in October. With the release being scheduled for October 13th, there's not really much time before then. So we are going to look into whatever we can once there's more information. I'm going to have a very quick holiday that I planned way before I knew about this, but I should be back before any major announcements happen. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And again, if you want to have early trading tips for the expansion, then that will be on my Patreon. So consider supporting me there. Thanks to all my patrons who are doing exactly that. And thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.